Mom, what happened to you? How did you end up here? Where did all the money go?
Billionaire Marcus Williams thought his mother was living comfortably in assisted living with his younger brother. For 18 years, he sent $10,000 monthly, over $2 million total, to ensure Eleanor Williams wanted for nothing in her golden years. But when private investigators found the 76-year-old sleeping on a cot in a Detroit shelter, sharing meals from a soup kitchen, Marcus asked one question that made his brother Vincent's face go pale. Where is every penny I sent? If you've ever wondered how far family betrayal can go, this story will leave you speechless. This is about stolen dignity, a mother's suffering, and a son's fight to restore what was taken. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because stories like this need to be heard. Now, let's get into what really happened. Marcus Williams sat in his corner office on the 68th floor of his Seattle headquarters, staring at the rain-soaked cityscape that stretched toward Puget Sound. At 52 years old, he had built a technology empire worth $4 billion through software development and cloud computing solutions. His company employed 15,000 people across 4 continents. But on this gray February morning, none of that success mattered. The woman sitting across from him, private investigator Sarah Martinez, had just delivered news that shattered everything Marcus thought he knew about his family. Sarah slid a tablet across the glass desk, her expression somber. On the screen were photographs that Marcus struggled to comprehend at first. An elderly woman with silver hair pulled into a thin ponytail. She wore a coat that was too large for her small frame, standing in line at what appeared to be a food distribution center. Another photo showed her sitting on a narrow cot in a crowded room filled with other homeless women. The final image captured her slowly walking with a cane, her shoulders hunched against the cold, wearing shoes held together with duct tape. Marcus's hands went numb as he studied the woman's face. Those eyes, that particular way she held her head, even in these circumstances. The slight scar on her left cheek from a childhood accident she'd told him about years ago. It was like seeing a ghost. That can't be her, Marcus whispered, his voice catching. My mother is supposed to be at Evergreen Senior Living in Ann Arbor. She's supposed to have round-the-clock care. She's supposed to have everything she needs. Sarah leaned forward, her voice steady but gentle. Mr. Williams, I've been doing investigative work for 22 years. I followed the address you provided, the one where you've been sending money since 2007. That facility exists. Your brother Vincent lives in a condo 3 blocks away, drives a Tesla, and his 2 kids attend University of Michigan on full scholarships. But your mother, she paused, letting the reality settle. Your mother has been living at Grace Mission Shelter on Detroit's east side for the past 4 months. Before that, I traced her to a neglected care home on the outskirts of the city. Staff there remember her. They said a man matching Vincent's description dropped her off 18 years ago, paid 6 months up front in cash, then never came back. When that home closed down last fall, residents were scattered. Your mother ended up on the streets with nothing. Marcus felt his chest constrict. His cardiologist had warned him about stress, about his blood pressure, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment. For 18 years, he had faithfully sent money every single month. Not once had he missed a payment. Not once had he questioned whether Vincent was fulfilling his promise to care for their mother. He had trusted his younger brother because they were family, because Vincent had come to him during a desperate time with what seemed like the perfect solution. The day Marcus had to choose between his mother and his career remained one of the hardest days of his life. Eleanor Williams had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia at 58, just as Marcus's startup was taking off. The company was in a critical phase. Potential investors were circling, major contracts were being negotiated, and Marcus was working 18-hour days just to keep everything from falling apart. He was a single father raising a 10-year-old daughter after his divorce, managing a company on the verge of either spectacular success or complete failure. Eleanor had worked 2 jobs her entire life after Marcus's father died when Marcus was 15. She cleaned offices at night and worked as a cashier at a grocery store during the day, sacrificing everything to put both her sons through college. She had been Marcus's rock, his inspiration, the reason he fought so hard to succeed. The thought of her declining, of losing her memories, of needing care he couldn't personally provide, it devastated him. That's when Vincent appeared with his proposal. Vincent was 38 then, working as a real estate agent in Michigan, married with 2 young children. He came to Seattle and sat Marcus down with spreadsheets and facility brochures. "I can do this, big brother," Vincent had said, his face earnest and trustworthy. "I'm in Michigan, close to Mom. I can manage her care, make sure she's comfortable, visit her regularly. You're building something incredible here. You're about to change the world. Don't let guilt destroy what you've worked for. Let me handle Mom. You handle the business. We'll both be doing what we're best at." Marcus remembered the relief he felt hearing those words. "Are you sure?" he'd asked. "It's a huge responsibility." Vincent had taken his hand, looked him in the eye. "She's my mother too. I love her just as much as you do. I want to do this. I want to be the one who makes sure her final years are peaceful and dignified." They had worked it out with lawyers. Marcus would provide $10,000 monthly to an account managed by Vincent specifically for Eleanor's care. Over 18 years, that amounted to more than $2 million. Money to ensure his mother had the best facility, the best medical care, activities, and comfort, everything she deserved after a lifetime of sacrifice. Marcus had visited twice in the first year. Eleanor was in a clean facility, seemed content, though her memory was already fading. She sometimes didn't recognize Marcus, which broke his heart. Vincent assured him this was normal, that some days were better than others. He suggested that Marcus's visits might actually be confusing her, making her condition worse. "Let her settle into a routine," Vincent had said. "The staff says she does better when things are predictable. We can arrange visits when she has her good days." Marcus, drowning in the demands of a rapidly growing company and raising his daughter alone, had agreed. He told himself he was doing the right thing. He told himself that money could provide what his presence couldn't. He told himself that Vincent was giving their mother the attention Marcus couldn't. Now, staring at photos of his mother sleeping in a homeless shelter, Marcus understood the magnitude of his failure. He hadn't just been sending money into a void. He had been funding Vincent's comfortable life, while their mother suffered in ways Marcus couldn't yet fully comprehend. "I need to see her," Marcus said, standing abruptly. His assistant tried to stop him, reminding him of a board meeting and investor calls, but Marcus brushed past her. Sarah followed as they took the elevator down to the parking garage, where Marcus's driver waited with the company car. "Mr. Williams," Sarah said carefully as they settled into the back seat, "I should prepare you. Your mother's condition has deteriorated significantly. The dementia has progressed. She may not recognize you. And the trauma of these past years," she hesitated. "She's been through things no one should endure, especially not in their 70s. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He pulled out his phone and booked the company jet. They would be in Detroit in 4 hours. The flight felt endless. Marcus couldn't eat, couldn't focus on work. He kept looking at the photos Sarah had taken. His mother, reduced to this. The woman who had worked herself to exhaustion to give him opportunities, who had believed in him when no one else did, who had sacrificed her own comfort for her son's futures, abandoned in her most vulnerable years. They landed at Detroit Metro as evening fell. The city looked tired under gray skies, neighborhoods showing the scars of economic hardship. Grace Mission Shelter occupied a converted warehouse in an area that had seen better decades. The building's brick facade was crumbling, windows covered with security bars, a faded sign offering hope to the hopeless. Marcus stepped out of the black SUV onto cracked pavement, feeling profoundly out of place in his custom suit. Sarah led him inside, where they were greeted by a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and tired shoulders. Her name tag read, Patricia Morrison, Director. "Can I help you?" Patricia asked, her voice carrying the weariness of someone who'd seen too much suffering. "I'm looking for Eleanor Williams," Marcus said, his voice tight. "I was told she's staying here." Patricia's expression shifted to recognition. She knew who Marcus Williams was. His face had been on magazine covers. His company was one of Seattle's biggest success stories. "May I ask what this is about?" "I'm her son," Marcus said, the words feeling hollow after 18 years of absence. Patricia studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "She's in the common area. We just finished dinner service." She led them through a hallway that smelled of industrial cleaner and institutional food. The common area was a large space with mismatched furniture and a television playing in the corner. Women of various ages sat in small groups or alone, some staring at nothing, others engaged in quiet conversation. And there, in a chair by the window, sat his mother. Eleanor Williams looked so much smaller than Marcus remembered. She had always been petite, but now she seemed almost fragile, her body hunched, her hands folded in her lap. She wore a donated sweater that hung loose on her thin frame and pants that were slightly too long. Her silver hair was clean but simply cut, and she wore no jewelry. But even diminished by age and circumstance, she maintained a quiet dignity in the way she sat, the way she gazed out the window at the darkening sky. Marcus's throat closed up completely. This was the woman who had raised him, who had believed in him, who had worked herself to the bone so he could have a better life. And he had let her end up here. Eleanor, Patricia called gently. You have visitors. Eleanor turned slowly, her movements careful as if her body hurt. When she saw Marcus standing there in his expensive suit, confusion crossed her face. She studied him the way someone might look at a half-remembered dream. Marcus walked closer, his legs feeling unsteady. Up close, he could see the lines of hardship etched into her face, the way her hands trembled slightly, the uncertainty in her eyes. Mom, he said softly, it's Marcus, your son. Eleanor stared at him for a long moment. Something flickered in her eyes, recognition, perhaps, or maybe just confusion. Marcus, she said finally, her voice thin and uncertain. My Marcus? Yes, Mom. It's me. Her eyes filled with tears. You're so tall, she said, as if he were still a child. And so handsome in your suit. Are you going somewhere important? The dementia had progressed significantly, Sarah had warned him. Eleanor's mind was stuck somewhere in the past, pulling memories from different decades, mixing them together. I came to see you, Mom, Marcus said, kneeling beside her chair so he could look into her eyes. I came to take you home. Eleanor's face crumpled with emotion. I don't have a home anymore, she whispered. Vincent said there was no money. He said you were too busy with your important work. He said I needed to understand that I was a burden. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He reached for his mother's hands, so small and frail in his own. That's not true, Mom. None of that is true. I've been sending money every month. $10,000, every single month for 18 years. Over $2 million total. Eleanor looked at him with such confusion that Marcus realized she couldn't process numbers like that anymore. The dementia had taken her ability to understand finances, time, complex information. But she understood emotion. She understood the pain in her son's voice. Vincent told me you forgot about me, Eleanor said, tears running down her weathered cheeks. He said you had a new life and didn't want an old mother slowing you down. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, the kind that made his vision narrow and his hands shake. But he forced himself to stay calm for his mother's sake. I never forgot you, Mom. Not for one single day. And you're coming with me right now. You're never sleeping here again. Over the next hour, Marcus made arrangements with Patricia. He donated $100,000 to the shelter on the spot and promised more. Patricia helped gather Eleanor's few belongings, a small bag containing 2 changes of clothes, a worn photo of Marcus and Vincent as children, and a faded handkerchief that had belonged to her late husband. Eleanor was hesitant to leave, afraid this was a dream or a trick. She had learned not to hope for rescue, not to expect anything good. But Patricia spoke to her gently, reassuring her, and eventually Eleanor agreed to go with Marcus. The flight back to Seattle was surreal. Eleanor sat in the leather seat of the private jet, touching the armrests as if they might disappear. She kept asking if this was real, if Marcus was really there, if she was really safe. Marcus sat beside her, holding her hand, telling her stories about his daughter Emily, Eleanor's granddaughter who had graduated from Stanford last year. I have a granddaughter, Eleanor asked, her face lighting up. You do, Mom. Her name is Emily. She's 28 now. She's a doctor. I always wanted to meet her, Eleanor said wistfully, though Marcus knew she probably had met Emily as a child, before the memories faded. When they arrived at Marcus's home in Seattle, a modern house overlooking the water, Eleanor seemed overwhelmed by the space and luxury. Marcus's housekeeper, Rosa, who had worked for him for 15 years, took one look at Eleanor and immediately went into action. She prepared a warm bath, laid out soft clothes, made soup and tea. Marcus called his daughter. Emily arrived within an hour, having dropped everything at the hospital where she worked. When she saw her grandmother, she burst into tears. Grandma Eleanor, she whispered, embracing the small woman carefully. Eleanor looked up at this beautiful young woman with confusion and wonder. "Are you an angel?" she asked. "No, Grandma. I'm Emily, your granddaughter." "I have a granddaughter," Eleanor said, as if hearing it for the first time. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He paced his study, phone in hand, making calls. First to his forensic accountant, James Parker. "I need you to trace every penny of $2 million. I need to know where it went, what it bought, who benefited. I need documentation that will hold up in court." Second call to his attorney, Michelle Rodriguez. "I need criminal charges prepared for elder abuse, embezzlement, fraud, and anything else that will stick. The target is my brother Vincent Williams. I want him to understand what he's done." Third call was to Vincent. Marcus dialed the number he'd called hundreds of times over the years, always getting reassuring updates about their mother's care. Vincent answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful and unsuspecting. "Marcus, hey, I was just thinking about you. How's business?" "I found Mom," Marcus said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. There was a pause, just a fraction too long. "What do you mean?" "Mom's at Evergreen. She's doing fine. Had a good week, actually." "Stop lying," Marcus said. "I found her in a homeless shelter in Detroit. I found her sleeping on a cot, eating from a soup kitchen, wearing donated clothes. So I'm going to ask you one time, Vincent, and you better think very carefully before you answer. Where's the $2 million I sent for our mother's care?" The silence stretched. When Vincent spoke again, the cheerfulness had vanished. "Marcus, listen, it's complicated. The money was used appropriately. Care facilities are expensive. Medical costs." "Then you'll have no problem providing receipts," Marcus interrupted. "Bank statements, facility bills, medical records. I want documentation for every single penny. My attorney will be in touch." "And Vincent?" Marcus paused, letting the weight settle. "You better get yourself a good lawyer, because I'm going to make sure you pay for every day our mother suffered." He hung up before Vincent could respond. Over the next few days, Marcus took his mother to specialists. The medical reports were devastating. Eleanor's dementia had progressed to moderate stage, accelerated by stress and trauma. She had untreated diabetes, severe malnutrition, and chronic pain from arthritis that had never been properly managed. The doctors said that with proper care, medication, and a stable environment, her quality of life could improve, but the damage from years of neglect was permanent. Marcus set up a care suite in his home with round-the-clock nurses. He hired specialists. He made sure his mother had everything she needed. But what Eleanor needed most was time with family. She didn't remember much, but she remembered feelings. And being surrounded by love, by her son and granddaughter, by people who treated her with dignity, that reached through the fog of dementia. James Parker worked his magic with financial records. What he uncovered was damning evidence of systematic theft. Vincent had indeed been receiving Marcus's monthly deposits into the account established for Eleanor's care. But Vincent had been transferring the money to his personal accounts almost immediately. The care home Vincent had initially placed Eleanor in was a low-cost facility, $800 per month, paid in cash, no paper trail. After 6 months, Vincent had stopped even that minimal payment. Eleanor had been moved to progressively worse situations, eventually ending up in a facility that was shut down by the state for violations. Meanwhile, Vincent had been living well. He'd purchased a $600,000 condo in Ann Arbor, 2 luxury vehicles, his children's college tuition fully paid, family vacations to Europe every year, staying in 5-star hotels, investment properties, a boat, country club memberships. Vincent had been living like a wealthy man while their mother wore shoes held together with duct tape. But the cruelty went deeper than theft. Vincent had deliberately isolated Eleanor. He never visited her. He never brought his children to see her. He told staff at the facilities not to allow her phone access because it upset her. He made sure she had no contact with anyone who might question her situation or alert Marcus. And when Marcus called for updates, Vincent had lied smoothly. He described fictional activities, made-up outings, invented conversations. He even sent Marcus photos, carefully staged shots from brief visits where he'd pose with Eleanor just long enough to capture proof of her good care, then leave immediately after. Marcus learned that when Eleanor still had good days, she would ask staff about Marcus. "Where's my son? Why doesn't he visit?" They would tell her that her son was busy, that he sent money, that he cared. But as the years passed and Marcus never came, Eleanor had internalized a different story, that she had been forgotten, that she was a burden, that she didn't matter. 6 weeks after finding Eleanor, Marcus was ready to confront Vincent face to face. His lawyers advised against it, but Marcus needed to look his brother in the eye. He needed to understand how someone could do this to their own mother. He didn't tell Eleanor where he was going. She was having a good morning, sitting in the sunroom with Emily, looking through photo albums. Emily was patiently explaining who people were, and Eleanor was smiling at the images even if she couldn't remember the moments. Marcus flew to Detroit with Sarah and Michelle. They drove to Vincent's condo in Ann Arbor, a modern building in an upscale neighborhood. Vincent's Tesla was in the parking garage, shiny and expensive. When Vincent opened his door, his face went through several expressions: surprise, fear, guilt, then defensive anger. "Marcus, what are you doing here? You should have called. We need to talk," Marcus said, pushing past him into the condo. It was beautifully furnished, decorated with art and expensive furniture. Through the window, Marcus could see the pool and tennis courts. All of this built with money meant for their mother. They ended up in Vincent's living room. Marcus slammed a folder of bank statements onto the coffee table. $2 million, he said, his voice deadly quiet. 18 years of monthly deposits. Every penny I sent to ensure our mother had dignity and care in her final years. Where is it, Vincent? Vincent's face had gone pale. His hands trembled. I used it for Mom's benefit. Care facilities are expensive. Which care facility? Marcus demanded. Because the investigators tell me you dumped her in an $800 a month hellhole and then abandoned her completely. They tell me you bought this condo, those cars outside, paid for your kids' college, took vacations to Paris and Rome, all while our mother wore donated clothes and slept in a homeless shelter. Vincent's jaw clenched. I gave her a place to live. I made sure she had food and a roof. That cost money. You put her in facilities that were shut down by the state for abuse and neglect, Marcus said, his voice rising. You isolated her so she couldn't tell anyone what was happening. You lied to me for 18 years. And when the last facility closed and she ended up on the streets, you did nothing. You let our 76-year-old mother with dementia sleep in a shelter. Vincent stood up, his face flushing with anger. You want to know the truth? Fine. I resented her. I resented you. You were always the golden child. You were always the one she bragged about. Marcus the genius. Marcus the success story. What about me? I worked hard too, but it was never enough. So yes, when you came to me with your money and your guilt, I took it. I took every penny because for once in my life, I got something you meant for someone else. The confession hung in the air like poison. Marcus felt sick. She's our mother, Vincent. She sacrificed everything for both of us. She sacrificed everything for you. Vincent spat back. I was just the other son. The one who wasn't special. Michelle Rodriguez cleared her throat. Mr. Williams, I'm recording this conversation. You've just admitted to elder abuse, embezzlement, and fraud. I suggest you stop talking and call your attorney. Vincent's face went from angry to terrified as he realized what he'd just said. Within the hour, police arrived. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, facility records, witness testimony from shelter staff, and former care home workers. Vincent was arrested on multiple felony charges. His assets were frozen, his condo and vehicles seized. The money recovered would go into a properly protected trust for Eleanor's ongoing care. Vincent's wife filed for divorce within a week. His children, both in their 20s, reached out to Marcus with apologies and shame. They claimed they hadn't known, though Marcus wondered how much they'd chosen not to see. He made sure they weren't held responsible for their father's crimes, but he also made it clear that Eleanor was his priority. The trial happened 8 months later. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Medical experts testified about Eleanor's condition and the neglect she'd suffered. Patricia from Grace Mission testified about the state Eleanor was in when she arrived at the shelter. Financial experts walked the jury through every stolen dollar. And Marcus testified. He sat in that witness box and admitted his own failure. He explained how he'd trusted his brother, how he'd chosen to believe reassuring lies rather than demanding proof. He described finding his mother in a shelter and the guilt that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Vincent to 15 years in federal prison and ordered full restitution plus damages. You didn't just steal money, the judge said. You stole your mother's dignity. You stole her final good years. You betrayed not just your brother's trust, but the sacred bond between parent and child. This court finds your actions unconscionable. A year passed. Eleanor's condition was stable with proper care, medication, and a loving environment. She lived with Marcus in a converted suite that had everything she needed: medical equipment, safety features, but also warmth and family photos and sunlight. Her memory continued to fade, but there were still good moments. Times when she would recognize Marcus or Emily. Days when she would smile at something on TV or enjoy a favorite meal. She couldn't remember much of her past, but she could feel that she was safe, that she was loved, that she mattered. Marcus had cut back on work, promoting trusted executives to handle day-to-day operations. He spent his mornings with Eleanor, having breakfast together, reading to her, sitting with her in the garden. He would tell her stories about her life, show her photos, play music she used to love. Sometimes she would pat his hand and say, "You're a good boy." She didn't always know he was her son, but she knew he was someone who cared. Emily visited several times a week, often bringing friends from the hospital who specialized in dementia care. She started a foundation in her grandmother's name, focused on protecting vulnerable elderly people from financial exploitation. One Sunday afternoon, Marcus sat with Eleanor in the garden. She was having a particularly clear day, seeming more present than usual. They watched birds at the feeder, enjoying the sunshine. "Marcus," Eleanor said suddenly, and her voice had a clarity it often lacked. "Yes, Mom. Thank you for finding me," she said, looking directly at him. "I was lost for so long." Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes. "I'm so sorry it took me so long, Mom. I'm so sorry I let you down." Eleanor patted his hand with her small, weathered fingers. "You're here now? That's what matters. You're a good son." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer. Then Eleanor's clarity began to fade again, her eyes growing distant, her mind drifting back into the fog. But for that brief moment, she had been fully present. She had known him. She had forgiven him. That evening, Marcus video called the investigative team that had helped him find Eleanor. He wanted to fund an organization dedicated to finding other vulnerable elderly people who had fallen through the cracks. Too many families assumed their loved ones were being cared for. Too many people suffered in silence. The Eleanor Williams Foundation launched the following year with a $50 million endowment. The organization investigated suspected cases of elder abuse, helped families locate missing seniors, provided legal support for victims of financial exploitation, and advocated for stronger protections. Marcus also established a scholarship program for care workers, recognizing that the people who actually cared for vulnerable populations were often underpaid and undervalued. He wanted to support those who did the hard, essential work of providing dignity to people in their most vulnerable years. 2 years after finding Eleanor, Marcus took her to visit the shelter where she had stayed. Grace Mission had been renovated with his donations: new beds, updated facilities, expanded services. Patricia Morrison was still the director, and she greeted Eleanor with a warm hug. "Do you remember me, Eleanor?" Patricia asked gently. Eleanor looked at her with uncertain eyes. "You have a kind face," she said. Patricia smiled. "You were always so polite, even when you had nothing. You would thank us for every meal, every blanket. You were a light in this place." They had named one of the new wings after Eleanor. The Eleanor Williams Safe Haven, a specialized area for elderly homeless individuals with dementia or other cognitive conditions. It provided medical care, security, and dignity while social workers helped reunite them with family or find appropriate long-term placement. Marcus stood in that wing, looking at the comfortable rooms, the safety features, the care stations. He couldn't undo the years his mother had suffered, but he could help make sure other families didn't experience the same tragedy. Eleanor sat in one of the common areas, looking around with vague recognition. She couldn't articulate memories of her time here, but something in her body language suggested she knew this place, that it meant something. "We're safe here," Eleanor said suddenly, patting Marcus's hand. "Yes, Mom. Everyone here is safe. You made sure of that." On the drive back home, Eleanor dozed in the back seat while Marcus drove. He thought about Vincent, serving his sentence in federal prison. Marcus had received letters from him, apologies, explanations, requests for forgiveness. Marcus had read them but hadn't responded. Maybe someday he could forgive, but that day hadn't come yet. The betrayal cut too deep. What Marcus had learned through all of this was that money alone meant nothing. He had sent millions thinking that was enough, that financial support equaled care. But his mother hadn't needed money. She had needed presence, advocacy, protection. She had needed someone to actually check on her, to make sure the resources were being used properly, to be her voice when dementia stole her own. At a foundation gala 3 years after finding his mother, Marcus told Eleanor's story to a room full of donors and advocates. He didn't hide his own failures or paint himself as a hero. He was honest about the guilt, the mistakes, the years he had chosen convenience over verification. "I sent money and thought that was enough," he said to the silent room. "I trusted when I should have verified. I believed lies because the truth was inconvenient. And my mother paid the price for my failures." If sharing this story prevents even one other family from experiencing this betrayal, then maybe some good can come from our tragedy. The foundation helped thousands of vulnerable elderly people over the following years. Families learned to advocate better, to question care situations, to maintain actual contact rather than assuming everything was fine. Laws were strengthened. Oversight improved. The problem was far from solved, but progress was being made. Eleanor lived 4 more years after Marcus found her. Her final year was peaceful, spent in the home Marcus had made safe for her, surrounded by people who genuinely cared. She no longer recognized anyone most days, but she responded to kindness, to gentle touch, to familiar music. When she passed away quietly in her sleep at age 80, with Marcus holding her hand and Emily sitting beside her, there was grief but also gratitude. Gratitude that they had found her in time. Gratitude for the years they'd had together at the end. Gratitude that her final chapter had been rewritten from suffering to love. At Eleanor's funeral, hundreds of people attended. Family, foundation staff, people whose lives had been changed by the organization bearing her name, former shelter residents who remembered the quiet, polite elderly woman who used to share their circumstances. Marcus stood at the podium and spoke about his mother. Not just the tragedy of her later years, but the fullness of her life. Her sacrifice, her strength, her kindness, her resilience. He spoke about her love for her sons, even the one who had betrayed her. He spoke about how she had remained gracious even in the worst circumstances, how she had never lost her essential dignity even when everything else was taken from her. "My mother's story is both a warning and an inspiration," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his grief. "A warning about what can happen when we fail to protect our most vulnerable, but also an inspiration about resilience, about the power of love to heal, about the importance of fighting for justice even when it's difficult or painful. My mother didn't get all the years she deserved, but she got her dignity back. She got to know she was loved. She got to spend her final years safe and cared for. That matters." Emily spoke next, sharing memories of getting to know her grandmother in those final years. "She would tell me I had a kind face," Emily said through tears. "She didn't always know I was her granddaughter, but she knew I was someone who loved her. And in the end, maybe that's enough. To know you're loved, even if you can't remember all the details. To feel safe, even if you can't articulate why. Grandma taught me that presence matters more than memory, that dignity matters more than recognition, that love transcends the limitations of the mind." They buried Eleanor next to Marcus's father in a cemetery overlooking the water. The headstone read, "Eleanor Williams, beloved mother and grandmother. She sacrificed everything for her family. May she rest in the peace she deserved." In the years that followed, Marcus continued the foundation work with renewed purpose. He had failed his mother once, but he wouldn't fail the mission of protecting others. The organization grew, helped more people, influenced policy, changed lives. Vincent was released after serving 12 years of his sentence, time reduced for good behavior. He reached out to Marcus, asking to meet. Marcus agreed, though he brought Emily with him for support. They met at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop where Vincent looked older, thinner, marked by years in prison. His eyes held genuine remorse. "I don't expect forgiveness," Vincent said quietly. "I don't deserve it. What I did to Mom, to you, to our family, there's no excuse. Prison gave me a lot of time to think about who I became and why." Marcus listened without interrupting. "I was jealous," Vincent continued. "My whole life, I was the other brother, the one who wasn't exceptional. And instead of dealing with that, instead of being proud of you, I let it poison me. When you trusted me with Mom's care, I saw an opportunity to finally have what you had. Money, comfort, status. And I took it. I justified it by telling myself I deserved it, that you owed me somehow. But the truth is, I stole from the woman who loved us both equally. I stole her dignity. I stole her final years. And I can never, ever make that right. Emily spoke up, her voice controlled but firm. You can't make it right. Grandma died without understanding why you abandoned her. She spent years thinking she was worthless, that she was a burden. Do you understand what that means? She gave you everything, and you made her feel like she was nothing. Vincent's eyes filled with tears. I know. I live with that every single day. Marcus finally spoke. I'm not here to forgive you, Vincent. I'm not there yet, and I might never be. But I'm here because Mom would have wanted me to at least listen. She loved you, even after everything. Even when her mind was going, she would sometimes ask about her other boy. She never stopped being your mother. Vincent broke down completely. I don't deserve that. I don't deserve any of it. No, you don't, Marcus agreed. But that's who she was. And that's what I'm trying to honor now. Her capacity for love, even when it wasn't returned. The foundation helps people like her. Every person we save from exploitation, every family we keep together, every vulnerable elder who gets proper care, that's Mom's legacy. Not what you did to her, but what we're building from the ashes of your betrayal. They didn't reconcile that day. Marcus and Vincent would never have the relationship they once did. But Marcus had said what he needed to say, and Vincent had heard it. That would have to be enough. 5 years after Eleanor's death, the Eleanor Williams Foundation had helped over 3,000 vulnerable seniors. They had trained thousands of care workers. They had influenced legislation in 12 states, strengthening protections for elderly people in care facilities. They had created a hotline for people to report suspected elder abuse, investigated by trained professionals. Marcus was 62 now, beginning to think about his own legacy beyond business. Emily had taken over day-to-day operations of the foundation, proving to be a passionate and effective advocate. She had her grandmother's kindness and her father's determination, a powerful combination. One evening, Marcus stood in his home office, looking at the wall where he'd hung a large portrait of Eleanor. It was from her 50s, before the dementia, when she was still fully herself. She was smiling at something off camera, her eyes bright with intelligence and warmth. I hope I did right by you, Mom, Marcus said softly to the portrait. I know I failed you when it mattered most, but I've tried to make sure your suffering wasn't meaningless. I've tried to protect others the way I should have protected you. His phone buzzed with a message from Emily. Just helped reunite a 73-year-old woman with her daughter. She'd been missing for 6 months, found in a care home 3 states away. Family had no idea. Investigation revealed the son-in-law was pocketing her Social Security. Grandma would be proud, Dad. Marcus smiled through tears. Yes, his mother would be proud. Not of him for the billions he'd made or the empire he'd built. She'd be proud that he'd learned, that he'd changed, that he'd taken his failure and transformed it into purpose. He typed back, she is proud. I feel it every day. Because that was the truth Marcus had come to understand. Love doesn't end with death. Responsibility doesn't end with failure. And redemption isn't about erasing your mistakes. It's about making sure they mean something, that they lead to change, that they prevent others from suffering the same way. Eleanor Williams had worked 2 jobs to give her sons opportunities. She had sacrificed her comfort for their education. She had loved them unconditionally, even when one of them betrayed that love in the cruelest way possible. And in the end, her story had saved thousands of other mothers, fathers, grandparents from the same fate. Her suffering had illuminated a problem society preferred to ignore. Her dignity, even in the worst circumstances, had inspired a movement. That was Eleanor's legacy, not the betrayal or the stolen years, but the love that survived it all and the change that love inspired. Thanks for watching. Until next time, remember, your worth isn't determined by who failed you. It's determined by what you build from the ashes of that failure. And love, real love, always finds a way to matter, even when everything else is lost.